Now, Corruption Watch has released its 2021 report on corruption. It says at least 10% of reports received were in the policing sector. Schools accounted for 5.8% of the total number of reported cases of alleged corruption. Let's unpack this report with Karam Singh, Executive Director at Corruption Watch. Thank you so much for your time this evening, sir. I mean, quite an interesting report. Let's just start with why Corruption Watch undertook this report and exactly how the investigation was conducted.
So this is what's been released is our annual report. It's something that we, as you can tell by the name, something we release every year. What's a little bit more special about this report is that this is the 10th year of Corruption Watch. Corruption Watch was launched in 2012. So this year's annual report gave us an opportunity to reflect upon some of the work that the organization has done over the last 10 years, some of the challenges and some of the successes.
Now, it's quite alarming, I must say, Mr. Singh, that the sector that's supposed to be upholding the rule of law is actually the one coming out on top in terms of this research and corruption. Just talk us through the findings.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've heard this now in the address from the new National Police Commissioner, that there has been an erosion of trust over many years, really since, going back to the pre-democratic era. And it's not clear that in the constitutional era that the police have been able to regain that place in the society as the guardians and the upholders of the rule of law. Consistently over the 10-year lifespan of Corruption Watch, we've seen numerous complaints about police corruption, complaints relating to bribery and extortion, complaints about abuse of power in terms of people's day-to-day interaction with the police, and even sort of more systemic complaints about procurement irregularities. So I think it's common cause that the police has been a troubled institution, that there hasn't been a consistent period of stable, ethical leadership running the police. And we hope that the appointment of the new National Police Commissioner gives the police an opportunity to hit the reset button and go forward in a more positive way.
Maybe before we focus in on the new police commissioner, what other sectors are recording high levels of corruption according to this report?
You know, the breakdown is almost 70% of corruption in the public sector, with the majority of complaints relating to national government. But we also receive any number of complaints annually from local government, from provincial government, and in terms of other state-owned entities. The type of corruption, the types of complaints we receive really vary, from issues around maladministration to abuse of power. As I've said earlier, issues around bribery and extortion, and lots of complaints relating to procurement irregularities and procurement fraud. And this is, in a way, this is a mirror up to the types of issues that we heard in the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, particularly in the area around procurement, and how that's been a particular area which has been targeted by organized crime and by fraudsters to defraud the state of big money. And we've also saw this in terms of the PPE investigations and the reports, investigations by the SIU in relationship to those matters over the last 2 years.
Mr. Singh, does the report zoom in on possible areas or provinces that are being highlighted as really recording very high levels of corruption in these sectors?
Historically, the number of complaints, and this was borne out last year, the highest number of complaints we receive traditionally come from Gauteng. We have any number of reporting platforms. You can contact Corruption Watch on email, on telephone. You can come into our offices. Our main office is based in Joburg. So I think over the years, we have had more of a footprint in urban areas, and that could possibly skew the numbers. So it's difficult to say that there's any one province or one area which is outstandingly, let's say, more corrupt than other areas. But certainly the highest numbers we've received historically have come from Gauteng and from Johannesburg.
I'm not sure if you can maybe elaborate on what this report says about our country and the relationship with corruption.
I think what the report points to is the fact that we do have what would seem to be an endemic corruption problem. So when Corruption Watch was launched in 2012, there was a sense that the country was moving in the wrong direction when it came to issues around accountability, transparency, good governance, and ethical conduct by public leaders. That was 10 years ago. We know now we've experienced over a decade of state capture, and things haven't gotten better. In fact, in many ways, we've gone in the wrong direction in terms of the fight against corruption. So the report, reflects upon that. It reflects upon the different interventions that have been made. I think we note with significance the intervention of the Zondo Commission over the last 3 years, at least in terms of giving us some kind of a forensic record historically of what happened in terms of state capture. But the gap then still remains in terms of how do we move from that commission of inquiry and its findings into a realm of consequence management and accountability. So, we see the prosecution today of the former social development minister. We have seen very few ministers, very few leaders who have been implicated in corruption successfully prosecuted. A perjury, in the scheme of things, while significant, is a relatively minor offense compared to something like fraud or money laundering. So in terms of what's coming out of the Zondo Commission and in terms of the implicated persons, we would want to see more accountability going forward, more prosecutions, more attempts at asset recovery of alleged stolen assets.
Mr. Singh, I think all South Africans would actually really like to see that happening, but is there an appetite to actually prosecute these kinds of crimes? But also, do you think the new police commissioner is up to the task of dealing with the corruption within his department?
Well, when you talk about appetite, I guess you're talking about something like political will. So if we take the new national police commissioner at his word, then he clearly has identified the issues around integrity and good governance within the police as amongst his priorities. If we listen to the National Director of Public Prosecutions, she says clearly that she's going to prioritize corruption cases. We hear the same types of messages coming out of the presidency. So certainly the rhetoric is there. Whether there's the capacity and the deep-seated political will to see this through, that remains to be seen, because up to this point, we've had a lot of talk, but we haven't seen much real action in terms of consequence management.